at the same time. Okay. Well, it is 7 o'clock, so I know everybody's time is precious, so we'll go ahead and get started. So hi, everybody. Welcome to the Evergreen Mill Road Widening Project Neighborhood Meeting. Please note that if WebEx cooperates, we're going to generate a recording of this meeting, which will be posted on the project webpage. So let's go ahead and start with some introductions. I'm Karen Franklin from the town of Leesburg, and I am the project manager for the Evergreen Mill project. Also presenting tonight will be Christy Fergale and Kristen Belfield from WSP. They're our design engineer for this project. Also with us from the town project team is Renee LaFollette. She's the Director of Public Works and Capital Projects. We also have Bud Siegel, the Deputy Director of Public Works and Capital Projects. Keith Wilson is with us. He's the town's land acquisition manager. And Calvin Groh is here. He's the town's traffic engineer. We also have additional members from the WSP design team, and they're available to help us answer questions at the end of the meeting as needed. Anne is our host. And Anne, are there any elected officials on this call you would like to mention?
Yes, we are also joined tonight by Neil Steinberg, who is a council member for the town of Leesburg.
Okay. Thank you very much. So with that, let's go ahead and start the presentation. So as I said, the three of us are going to give you a presentation, and then we'll open it up for questions. We're going to turn our video off so we're not distracting you. All right, so our meeting topics tonight, we're going to go over the project goals and a little bit of history of the project. We'll show you the design concept. We'll discuss some next steps, and then we'll open it up to comments and questions. So the project is to widen Evergreen Mill Road from 2 lanes to 4 lanes. The original project, shown in the red, went from South King Street to Battlefield Parkway. It was about 1 mile. During the scoping and initial design phase, it was determined that it would be advantageous to add the section of road in front of Heritage High School to try to help with some congestion issues at the entrance. So the yellow part was added, and that increased the project to 1.3 miles. Just a little bit about the project history. In 2016, the project design was funded in the Capital Improvements Program. Between 2016 and 2018, we underwent scoping. We did some coordination with the Battlefield Parkway design and some potential development projects. And it was during that time that it was identified that it would be advantageous to extend the project limits to include the Heritage High School frontage. So from 2018 to present, we did work on extending those project limits. We obtained additional funding for that portion of the project, and we completed the 30% concept plans. So the goals for the project is to improve traffic flow on Evergreen Mill Road, reduce congestion at the high school entrance, improve safety at the intersection with Battlefield Parkway in particular, and improve pedestrian and bicycle connectivity. The project includes widening from 2 lanes to 4 lanes, adding turn lanes at intersections, rehabilitating or adding curb and gutter, trails and sidewalks to the full length, adding storm drainage and management systems, and improving signal timing to reduce congestion. All right, at this point, I'm going to turn it over to Kristen Belfield, who's going to tell us about the traffic study.
Thank you. Well, my name is Kristen Belfield. I'm the traffic engineer for WSP, and I'd like to discuss the traffic study for this project. So prior to determining the roadway layout, we study the traffic operations throughout the study area. And our study area goes from South King Street down to Heritage High School. We did traffic counts in February 2020 before the COVID pandemic hit. And a little fun fact is that this was the last set of traffic counts that we got on all of our projects right before the COVID pandemic hit. So we got this in just in time. So we take those traffic counts and we take regional projections and we take development projections and we project out the traffic to a future year. Our future year is 2045. So we took the Meadowbrook Farm development, the nearby Compass Creek development, and regional growth, and then projected traffic volumes out to 2045. Now we do expect to see approximately an 80% increase in traffic by the year 2045. So the town is being proactive in trying to implement these improvements before the significant increase in traffic. It may go from about 11,000 vehicles a day now to up to 20,000 vehicles a day in 2045. So the traffic study will help us to determine the intersection layouts with some consideration for geometric constraints. The study showed us that we needed left turn bays at all of the intersections. We needed dual rights going northbound at South King Street. And we also needed dual lefts going westbound on Battlefield Parkway. The traffic study also showed us that we needed to extend the improvements to Heritage High School. So the town has done that. The study also showed that there were some safety issues with crashes at Battlefield Parkway and Evergreen Mill Road. That's kind of the crash hotspot, if you will, for the corridor. That's where most of the incidents occur. So the improvements with changing the signal phasing to protected phasing, which is basically adding the green arrows so that left turns only travel, protected. They're by themselves, that you don't have to worry about the opposing traffic. Basically, the left turn signals, eastbound and westbound on Battlefield Parkway, those are going to become protected lefts. That's going to significantly reduce those angle crashes that are experienced at the intersection of Evergreen Mill Road and Battlefield Parkway. Now, the traffic study shows us that in the future, how things are going to operate. We first compare how it's going to operate in the no-build condition. We show how the intersections will operate without any roadway improvements. And then we compare that to the build condition, which shows how it'll operate with the improvements. And with the improvements in the year 2045, we're going to see about a 60% reduction in overall network delay reduction. And then in the evening peak, we're going to see overall an approximate reduction of about 45% in delay time. So now I'm going to turn it over to Christy, because we take the traffic operations study, and this helps us to determine the intersection layouts. And Christy is going to go into more detail about the roadway layout and intersection layouts.
Thanks, Kristen. So good evening, everyone. Again, my name is Christy Frigale, and I'm the project manager with WSP working with the town on this project. So before I get into the design details, I just wanted to mention that really the goal of this evening is really to provide you with an overview of these preliminary plans, and that way we can gather all the stakeholder feedback before we proceed. We just really want this to be a collaborative effort, so we appreciate you all coming today and look forward to hearing your comments. So let me start off by giving you just the lay of the land, and don't worry when you look at this screen, this is not an eye test. You're not expected to read all of this. We will be posting these exhibits on the project website after the meeting, so you can feel free to take a deeper dive at any area of concern and shoot us your comments at your convenience. So let me just start out by showing you the project limits. So as Karen mentioned, it starts across from the synagogue and high school on the southern side, and the widening proceeds up Evergreen Mill Road and ends at South King Street. So in general, the improvements consist of widening from 2 lanes to 4 lanes. So in existing conditions, there's 1 lane in each direction. And when this project is complete, there's going to be 2 lanes in each direction. And we'll also be constructing intersection improvements, which include the signal timings that Kristen was just discussing, as well as lengthening the turn lanes for the traffic analysis. And one thing to note is that the turn lanes will actually be reduced to 11 feet wide, and that will help to limit the impacts. So another really important aspect of this project is the multimodal connectivity. And considering we have 3 schools and a park within this short stretch, we really just wanted to ensure that pedestrians, and especially all the kids, have safe routes to school. And as I'm sure you're aware, there are definitely some gaps in the sidewalk network throughout this corridor, so we'll definitely be fixing that. There's an existing trail on the northbound side that starts around the high school, and it just stops at Alpine Drive. So as part of this project, we'll be extending that trail from Alpine all the way up to South King Street. And on the opposite side of the road, there are different pieces of sidewalk, but there's definitely some links that are missing. So as part of this project, we're going to be constructing a 5-foot sidewalk between English U and Battlefield Parkway. So our new sidewalk is going to tie to the improvements that were recently constructed with the Battlefield Parkway widening. And then we'll pick up again in front of the elementary school. And there is existing sidewalk in front of the school, but we're going to be updating it a little bit, repairing some curb ramps, replacing some of the concrete. There's a section where it's only 4 feet wide and the new standard is 5 feet wide. So we'll just be doing some improvements all in front of the school. And that sidewalk actually ends right past the school, as I'm sure you're aware. So we'll be connecting into that location and extending new sidewalk up all the way to South King Street. So along with that, we'll also be adding curb and gutter. So this roadway has a lot of sections that are shoulder and ditch sections. And so what that does by adding the curb and gutter, we can use a little bit of the extra space from where the ditch and the shoulder were to place the sidewalk. And along with any roadway widening project comes your stormwater management. And we've taken a preliminary look at where these facilities can be located. And again, none of this is set in stone. This is still preliminary design, but we're strategically trying to locate them within the right-of-way or on town property, as well as some HOA open space. That way we can limit some of the residential impacts. So they're shown on this exhibit in green. So we have one facility right here on some HOA open space near English U. We have another facility in the right-of-way adjacent to Battlefield. One is located on the edge of the school property, the elementary school property. Another, we have this triangle-shaped facility, which is on the edge of the Evergreen Meadows HOA property. And then this last one is actually on town property. And what we're going to be doing there is removing one of the abandoned pump stations and replacing that with stormwater facility. So as with any project, this one is not without its challenges, and one of which is definitely all the coordination with the stakeholders. So we have all the residents, all the local neighborhoods and HOAs, and you all are a great asset. So like I said, you're here and we're happy to get your comments. You're the ones that drive this road every day. So we really want to make sure to get your input early on in the project. We have the 3 schools, so we need to take into account all the needs of Loudoun County Public Schools. And another challenge for this project is actually, I'm going to flip back to the previous slide, is all the jurisdictions. So half of, or I would say 2/3 of this project is within the town limits. So north of Battlefield Parkway, this is all the town. South of Battlefield Parkway, this is within Loudoun County and VDOT's jurisdiction. So there's just a lot of interagency coordination going on in this project, with 1/3 of it within Loudoun and then the other remaining within the town. And of course, not to mention we have all the development that's going on all over the place, coordinating with those developers for the new subdivisions, and as well as the fire and rescue and park service. So another one of the challenges on this project is the utilities. So as you can see here in this picture, and this is just the tip of the iceberg. So everything you see above here, there's twice as much below. We have some pretty complex utility poles. Not only do we have electricity running, we've got multiple carriers of communications and streetlights, and this runs the whole corridor of the southbound lane. So we're definitely trying to keep that in mind. We've got force mains, we've got private wells, gas lines, water lines, all kinds of stuff in this corridor that we're trying to avoid. Another area that presents a challenge is all of the earthwork. So this is mostly located north of Wallace as you're approaching South King Street. So there's big mounds of dirt, and there's steep cuts that go down to the floodplain. You can see in this picture, this is where the recent pond from the Meadowbrook neighborhood was just built. So this is another constraint with earthwork that we're definitely trying not to impact. In general, there's just a lot of recent improvements. Like I mentioned, the Battlefield widening that just happened, that we're trying to utilize, so that way we're not reconstructing things that were just built. So that's also a challenge. So now I'm going to take you on a little stroll along Evergreen Mill, the corridor for the widening. So we're going to start here at AA, section AA, And this is right at the start of the high school property. So you can see here, we have a section at the top and then a picture at the bottom. The existing through lane, we have one in the southbound direction, we have one left turn lane into the school, and we have one northbound through lane, and there's a shoulder section today. So in the proposed conditions, you can see where the widening is going to occur on this graphic by the dark gray areas. So we'll basically be maintaining this section and adding one lane on the left and one lane on the right. We'll be replacing the open shoulder section with curb and gutter, and we'll be maintaining the trail that runs adjacent to the high school. And one thing to keep in mind with this section is that this is where we're tying out our widening, but we are designing this taking into account that potentially in the future, Evergreen Mill could be widened south into Loudoun County. So we're coordinating with that. So now we're at section BB, and this is right across from the fields heading closer to Battlefield Parkway, you can see in the distance. The existing section has a striped shoulder. It has one southbound lane, through lane. It has a left turn lane onto Battlefield, a through lane, and then a right turn lane onto Battlefield. So for this section, we won't really be doing much widening on the left side. You can see just some curb and gutter here. We're trying to maintain the existing striping line, and that way we can fit in a little bit of a buffer and a sidewalk so that we can tie out before we impact the utility poles on this side, as well as these properties, as we understand that some of these properties on the corner here may have already been impacted by the recent widening of Battlefield. So we're just being careful to keep our improvements more on the right side of my screen here. And another benefit of that is that there's been right-of-way previously dedicated on the high school property, so that way we can widen to the right. They planned for this widening. Okay, moving along. So now we are just past Freedom Park, heading up towards Tolbert. You can see here we have, again, one southbound lane. We have a straight median area, a northbound lane, and then a right turn lane into the parks onto Tolbert. And in the future conditions, we'll be widening again, maintaining that widening on the right side here towards the previously dedicated right-of-way on the park property. We're going to be holding the existing curb and gutter on the left. That's what was recently constructed with the widening project at Battlefield. So you can see there's new curb and gutter, there's some new sidewalk, some new driveways. So we're trying our best to avoid impacting those recent improvements. And again, the trail will be maintained on the edge of the park property there. All right, we're continuing our stroll. So now we're coming up on the schools. So on the left, we have the elementary school. On the right, we have the middle school. We have the one southbound lane, a turn lane into the schools, and a northbound lane. So here we have the shoulder section on the right, and then we have some curb and gutter on the left. And here's where we're also trying to maintain that curb and gutter on the left and widen into the right into this shoulder section. Another benefit of widening over here to the right is that it actually lines up pretty well with the pavement approaching Alpine. It was recently, well, not recently widened there, but it was widened there when that development was constructed, so we can utilize that. And then we'll be reconstructing some of the sidewalk in this area and fixing some of the ramps. And the trail will be maintained on the right side. Part of it might be relocated a little bit due to the widening, but there'll still be, the same trail there, just maybe a little bit, a couple feet farther. Okay. So now we're starting to approach the curve coming up to Wallace. And you can see again, it's a very similar section with through lane, turn lane into the school, and one northbound lane. In this section, we have open section on both sides, shoulder on both sides. So on the left, we'll be adding the curb and gutter, primarily along the lane line, and then just squeezing in our sidewalk, maybe reducing our buffer strip a little bit to get around some of these poles. This is the area where we have some really complicated poles running. So again, we're going to be widening to the right side to avoid not only those poles, but some underground. There's some force mains and other things in this area that we're avoiding. So we'll have our lanes, and then we'll also have the 10-foot trail over here. So now we're coming up along the curve at Wallace. So this is a really tricky section. You can see we have utility poles on either side. We're really threading the needle, trying to avoid everything that we can with this section. here we have the one southbound lane. We have the striped median again, a northbound lane, and then a right turn lane into Wallace. So here we're going to be adding, squeezing in a little bit of sidewalk on the left, and then we'll be widening to the right and adding the trail. And then one thing that's a little bit different about this section is that we'll actually be converting this striped median to a raised grass median. And the couple reasons behind that are just that coming up on this curve, it does help just kind of naturally reduce speeds and just provide, it's aesthetic, you know, you're coming into your community, it's kind of a gateway feature, and it also can help to reduce crossover crashes. So that was a couple of the reasons for that. Oh, and one thing to keep in mind with the median, we made sure that we end the raised median before we come to the residential areas. So none of your access will be changed. If you take a left today, you'll be able to take a left after this project is constructed. The median won't be blocking anyone. Okay, so now we're coming up on where the new pond was just built. And you can see some of the earthwork in this picture. This is one of the challenges that I had brought up during the previous slides. But you can see it's a small section here. We only have one lane in each direction and a little bit of shoulder. It's really tight between these hills. So it goes up real high to the pump stations, and then it goes straight down to the floodplain within maybe 20 feet. And on the left side, this is where it goes down to the brand new pond that was just constructed. So you can see our proposed section, we're going to be putting in curb and gutter. We'll be replacing the guardrail. Then we'll have our sidewalk on the left. And then pedestrians will be protected by a handrail. And then we'll have a slope down tying out to where that new pond is. And then on the right side, we'll have the two lanes and then the trail and then another handrail. This section will also have some raised grass median. And one thing that I wanted to point out with this section that was really important when we were setting the alignment was thinking about the maintenance of traffic. So here we can actually build this whole half of the roadway offline. So that way you won't be impacted as you're driving on this side. It can stay open just like everyday traffic until we're ready to open the whole road. So it really should help minimize some of the impacts. All right, so now we're at the end of the project. Everyone got their steps in today. We're heading right up to South King Street. And you can see here we have one lane southbound, we've got a lane northbound. It's actually a through left northbound and then a right turn northbound. And this is also an open shoulder section. So in the proposed conditions, we'll be adding a lane on either side. You can see here by the dark gray. And one thing to keep in mind with this section is we know today it does look, you know, it's open, there's open space here and there, but we do understand that like anywhere in the town, like things are coming up for development pretty quickly. So we'll be coordinating with any future developers and making sure that our plans jive with theirs for this area. Okay, so that brings us to the next step. So what's going on? Right now, as we approach summer, we're gearing up for some additional field work. We're going to do a little bit more surveying, trying to nail down some locations for some extra areas that we want information about. We're going to be doing some test holes for utility locating. We'll be doing some geotechnical borings and environmental evaluations. So before you look at this and think, oh no, you know, my yard's going to be Swiss cheese by all of this activity, not everyone is going to have all of these things. These are just all the potential items that might be happening around the corridor. Notifications will be sent out shortly. You probably received one last year when we did some surveying, so we'll be sending them out again. And on those notifications, it'll say exactly what might be happening on your property. So you can be aware of that. And then, so once we get our results from all this extra field work and we also collect all of your comments, we'll be updating the plans this summer and submitting our 60% plans in the fall. And then from there, we'll hope to have another one of these neighborhood meetings to discuss the 60% design. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Karen to finish us up.
All right, thank you, Christy. So just a little bit about the project schedule. We're hoping to complete the design in 2023, and then we've got almost 2 years allotted for land acquisition and utility relocation. We think that's going to be a pretty big job for us. And then we're hoping we start the construction in spring of 2025 to finish in fall of 2026. And right now, our estimated budget for this project is a total cost of $22 million. So that concludes our formal presentation. I do want to let you know that we will be posting the presentation materials and the recording of this presentation on the website. I think we had some questions about that, perhaps. We will also be adding the ability for you to sign up to receive future updates on the project via email. And I'd like to, we're gonna start the question and answer part of this presentation at this point. Let me go ahead and turn my video back on. I'm hoping you guys will indulge me. I've never been able to do this before. I'm going to give a shout out to my mom in Connecticut. Hi, Mom. Never been able to do that. So I just had to do that. Okay. So because we're not in person for this presentation, we would usually break into groups and you would have an opportunity to talk about specifics with engineers. We don't have that opportunity with the virtual setting. So we're asking you to limit your questions to the broader topics of interest to all participants and to go ahead and contact me directly for those specific property questions. And you've got my contact information on that slide, so go ahead and jot that down and you can reach out to me and I'll make sure we get your questions answered. We do have a lot of folks on the call. We've actually got 39 folks registered. So we'll try to get to everyone and give everybody a chance to speak. However, we do plan to finish at 9 o'clock. So we've got quite a bit of time left. So hopefully we'll get to everybody. But at that time, we will stop questions and answers. And if you don't get your questions answered, again, reach out to me directly. For those of you connected through an electronic device, we've shown you a couple views that might be how your screen looks. But on the one on the left, if you hover your mouse over your name, you'll hopefully see a hand icon come up. We're asking everybody who's on electronically to raise your hand. And what we will do is one by one unmute you and give you a chance to ask your question or state your comment. And then we'll ask you to mute yourself and mute yourself back and remove your hand. So after you've done answering your question. And for those of you who have called in, if we have time, we'll unmute you and see if you have a question or something you want to add, and then we'll mute you back up. In addition, we also will be monitoring the question and answer box. I see there's a couple questions there already. When you use the question and answer box, you may find it under a little box with a question mark on your screen, or perhaps underneath 3 dots. The 3 dots may also be where you find your raised hand. If you open up the question and answer box, just make sure you ask the question to all panelists, and that way we'll be able to see it and hopefully be able to answer it. We are not monitoring the chat, so please don't use the chat for your questions. All right. Anne, I'm going to turn it over to you. Do we have any folks with their hands raised?
We don't, but a number of people are writing in the chat box, and it looks like it might be to everyone. I've sent the questions that are was sent to me privately to Christine so that she can read them. But I actually do have one hand raised here. So let me, Ann Jansen, I'm going to unmute you and you can ask your question. And
okay,
you're now unmuted.
okay, great. Can you hear me, Ann?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, great. My name is Ann Jansen. I live in the Evergreen Meadows subdivision, and I'm trying to get a better idea of where the lanes will be, specifically in front of Alpine, where we have our main entrance sign and trees, and we have the existing utility path, but so trying to get a better idea of what is going to happen there. There's not a lot of room, so let me see on the map.
All right, Christy, maybe you can provide a little bit of information about how the HOA entrance is going to look.
Yeah, sure. Sure, no problem. I'm going to zoom in a little bit to this area on our exhibit without getting too far into the weeds on it. But so you can see this yellow area. This will be the widening. I believe this is where you're referring to, approaching Alpine Drive. So we'll be pulling the trail back a little bit, and then we're actually going with a curb abutted section here. So for most of the trail, we do have a buffer in between the curb and the trail, but for this, because it was so constrained, like you were saying, I know you have your Evergreen Meadows sign. It's a little bit hard to see, but it's right here. So we're trying our best to avoid that. The landscaping in front of it will be impacted, just because we did run out of space here, but we're hoping to avoid the actual sign, and any impacts will be replaced, and any kind of landscaping that we can redo in this small buffer will be done as well. I'm not sure if Karen, you wanted to add anything else to that, but that's the gist of what's going on in this area. Hopefully you guys can see. I can zoom
No,
in
I
a
don't
little
think
bit
so.
more.
So
Do you have any-
the existing striped area will become a turn lane. Is that true, or?
So the striped area, you can kind of see it. We tried to put a transparent on this gray so you could still see underneath what was going on. Here's the striped area, so that will become a through lane. And
Oh,
then basically from the edge of that is your right turn lane.
wow.
So
Okay.
that lane lines up and that is going in front. So there'll be 2 lanes widened towards the school in this yellow area, and then only a sidewalk on the opposite side. So
And I'll be able
that's
to
from the
access
orange.
this when you add these pictures online?
Yes. Yeah. We'll be putting all of this on the website for everyone to drill down into some more of the details and hopefully get us some great comments that we can incorporate into the 60% plans. But
And
yeah, you can see.
real quick, are they, I had heard something about relocating the utility poles or making things underground, but then I also heard you saying you're trying to avoid the utility poles. So are they going to remain where they are, or it's going to be put underground?
So on the southbound side, we're trying our best to really avoid all those utility poles.
Okay.
We might be impacting one of them, I think, right where the sidewalk ends. I want to say right here. Yeah, relocate utility pole. So those won't be going underground. But I do know on this side, so let me zoom over a little bit, in front of the middle school, there are a few lights here. So I believe they're underground in front of the park, and then they also go underground again as we approach your community. But there's a few lights, or sorry, a few poles in front of the middle school, which we will be impacting. See, there's one here, another one here, that are within the widening limit. So it is something we're looking at, but it'll be a cost benefit kind of analysis, because it can potentially cost more than just relocating them. So that's something we're looking into, but it definitely will depend on the cost. And if, Karen, you wanted to add anything in on that?
Yeah, it's really sort of based on whether we can accommodate it in the budget as well. So cost becomes very important.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you. All right, Anne, you got anybody else with a raised hand?
I do not.
Okay, Christine, do you have any questions from the Q&A box?
Yes, and just quickly, Mark Miller had asked if he could ask his questions, but isn't able to raise his hand.
Okay.
Oh, am I on?
Mark Miller, you are now
Yeah.
unmuted.
Oh, good. Thank you. I wasn't sure how to raise my hand. So I actually am on the Loudoun County Planning Commission, and I represent the Catoctin District. And a portion of this project will run through my district. And so I wanted to just inquire, will this need to come to the Planning Commission and then the board at all for any kind of modification to county land? And also on that side of the county where those houses are on, I guess that would be the west side. Will any of those houses need to give up some land? It looks like it might be a few feet for each of them. I'm kind of curious where you are on that.
Christy, why don't you speak to the right-of-way issue, and then I'm going to ask Keith or Renee to speak to the first question.
Sure. Yeah, so I just zoomed in on the area I believe you were asking about with some of these residential properties on the edge here.
Right.
So we are trying our best to avoid any impacts on those actual properties. You can see the right-of-way line is this kind of cyan line here.
Okay.
And I mean, these are still, again, 30% preliminary plans, but what we're doing is running our curb and gutter along the edge line. So you can see that existing striped kind of shoulder right here. We're putting our curb and gutter, and then we'll have a little buffer and then the sidewalk. So actually the sidewalk is still pretty much within the same pavement limits that they see today. So
Okay.
as far as pavement goes, it's not anticipated to change too much. There will be some driveway impacts just because when we put in a sidewalk, we need to put in an accessible path through each one of these driveways. So it might change the grading a little bit. So that's why these are shown in yellow. But we don't anticipate it going past the right of way. And if it does, it would only be maybe a few feet or some temporary construction easements, but nothing
Okay.
major.
Thank you.
Okay.
And Mr. Miller, to answer the question about going to the Loudoun County Planning Commission or to the Board of Supervisors, it's our understanding in working with the county's BTCI staff and the Loudoun County Public Schools engineering staff that this project is in conformance with their design standards and would not need to go to either the Planning Commission or the board. Now, the town has reached out to Loudoun County to potentially do a boundary line adjustment to bring the road section only into the town corporate limits, which would put the road section under town maintenance. And the primary reason for that is to get the traffic signal at Heritage High School into our signal system so that we can coordinate that signal with the signal at Battlefield Parkway to make the ingress and egress from the high school in morning and afternoon times more effective.
Okay. One other quick question, is this more planning commission stuff? At the end of this, by Heritage High School in the synagogue where the road work will end.
Mm-hmm.
From there all the way down, as part of the comprehensive plan for the county in 2019, they moved that section from that first house right there all the way down to Shreve Mill and beyond to Loudoun Country Day School into the transition policy area, and the landowners are going to have applications coming in to rezone their property for additional housing, and part of that will include, without question, and it won't happen with otherwise, a full widening of Evergreen Mills from that point forward. So I assume that whatever future widening and design standards will happen for the rest of the county's portion of Evergreen Mills Road, that this section at Heritage, the back of Heritage and the synagogue, will be set up for a smooth connection into the widening of the rest of the road.
That is our full intent, and that is why we have kept engagement with the Loudoun County DTCI staff so that they are well versed in what we're doing with our design in front of Heritage and our termini point.
Okay, terrific.
All right. Anne, do you have any more hands raised?
I don't, but
I think I see
believe
one.
there is one more person who would like to ask a question. Let me find her. Evelyn Rollison, would you like to ask your question?
Yes, I want to know how much of my front yard I'm going to lose.
Yeah, that's one of those specific questions that if you could please write down the
Hi.
information if Christy switches back to
Yeah,
that
I
other.
was on the WebEx asking questions.
Can we mute that person?
What's up?
Yes.
Sorry about that, guys. That's one of those questions that if you could contact me directly, and Keith and I will be happy to talk to you about that. Christy, maybe switch back to the screen that's got the contact information. So if you could give me a call or go ahead and send me an
I
email.
can't read it. Oh, no glasses. Hold on a minute. We've got
Oh,
to
I think if you're ready to write down, I'll read it to you.
I can zoom in too.
Okay, we've got it. Thank you.
All right, terrific.
Mhm.
And it looks to me like a Ann Jansen might have their hand raised.
She has already asked her question and I am
Gotcha.
not able to take down the hand, so I'm keeping track of this.
Okay, sorry. All right, Christine, you got some questions in the Q&A box that we can answer?
I do.
Okay.
So we'll just start reading through. Also, if you have a question in the Q&A, please just type it out or raise your hand if you would like to ask it directly. So first question is, will there be a walkway or trail between the Evergreen Meadows and the new larger neighborhood? There's also a follow-up to that asks, also wondering about a crosswalk between Alpine and the new sidewalk on the other side of the street.
All right, I'm going to pass this over to WSP to discuss.
Sure, I can take this. We
Okay.
are considering and evaluating a location for a crosswalk because we understand it's important to get from one side of the road to the other for connectivity. So we're considering locations anywhere from at the intersection of Alpine to maybe closer to the schools. There are a lot of elements that we need to consider with the location for the crosswalk. We also are considering the appropriate signage, whether it's something that's a pedestrian activated light or specific pedestrian signs that really highlight the crosswalk in those locations. So it's definitely something that's being considered, but we're just trying to evaluate this specific location. So if you do have comments on locations that you would prefer, then please send those in to Karen, because then that gives us good feedback as far as, you know, what type of users and where people want to cross and, you know, where they're coming from and where they're going to, so that we can appropriately locate that crosswalk.
And there are some, I don't claim to be a traffic engineer, but Kristen has told me that some of this areas will be better than others for potentially placing that crosswalk based on how the traffic moves, etc. So we do have some limitations as to where we can put that crosswalk. So the other
Yes.
question was about the sidewalk, Christy, between.
Mm-hmm.
You can
Yep,
speak
I
to
could
that.
take on that question. So just to follow up quickly on the locations for the crosswalks, one thing that we're looking at is making sure it's safe for a crossing. So we want to locate it somewhere where we can fit a pedestrian refuge. So that's one of the things I was pointing out on near Wallace. So that's another bonus of having the raised median here, because we can potentially provide a little cut through, which makes it safer for pedestrians to cross the traffic. And then the same thing near Alpine, we do have the striped median there. We don't have the raised median, just the striped one, but we might be able to use some either some signage or some different types of patterns in the pavement to help that stand out and just be safe for all users. And then as far as the potential connection to the new trail, I believe you mean the trail that runs along the pond down here. Now, that's not part of the scope of this project. It would be a very tricky connection, I believe. I think the grades go down real steep because this is around the pond, which is much lower than where we're going to be. So the section there, let me zoom to it. It looks like this. So we're up here, that trail is down the bottom of this slope. So per ADA, we definitely can't traverse down a 2-to-1 slope. So it's not in the project scope as of right now to connect to that.
All right, I just wanted to add too that we'll be coordinating with the schools on the crosswalks as well to make sure that it works with what they support. So just to sort of follow up on that previous question. Do we have any more questions, Christine?
All right, I couldn't find my unmute. Yes, and there are also a couple other raised hands and a few others who have asked to speak that haven't been able to. So do we want to go through the Q&A written list or address those first?
Let's go ahead and address the folks that want to speak first.
Okay, next we have Craig Zink. You are now unmuted.
Hey, thank you so much. Yeah, so I was the one who asked the two previous questions, and I had a follow-up. And the follow-up is, when you do your traffic analysis, do you do an analysis of foot traffic at all? Because with the schools, I'm new to the neighborhood. I live in Evergreen Meadows, but I assume that with the schools, when they're open, there's lots of foot traffic in that area between the middle school and the elementary school. So just wondering if you guys take that into a factor, if there's different traffic study for foot traffic that goes into this.
All right, Kristen, that
Yeah.
sounds like yours.
Sure. For this study, we did not do pedestrian counts at this location. We know that we needed to provide pedestrian connectivity, but did not count how many children are going to the schools. If children are currently going to the schools, they would need a crossing guard, I would think, at this time in order to actually, before and after school hours, based on existing conditions, because there is no marked crosswalk for existing conditions. So for future conditions, we're looking at where we can provide a marked crosswalk that should hopefully include, the pedestrian signals, potentially a median refuge if we can get that in. But I think that would still, the students would still need the crossing guard to provide that safe route to their school before and after school hours.
Yeah, thanks for the response. I think the workaround at this point is going up to the light past the middle school and crossing there where there is a crosswalk. So it would just, obviously the one on the other side of the middle school, on the north side of the middle school, would be for convenience only. But thanks for that.
And again, remember that we're going to be, we need to coordinate with the schools heavily on that. So we'll be reaching out to them to discuss that as well, because it's got to meet their needs as well and their criteria. So we'll be coordinating with them.
Okay, our next speaker is Isabel Reyes. You are unmuted.
Hi, good evening, everyone.
Hi there.
Thanks.
Hello.
I also posted my question on a chat pod, but I appreciate the opportunity to speak. My question was related to the crosswalks and pedestrian connectivity, but also the element of by widening the road, you most likely are going to end up with higher speeds, and knowing that the current condition is, there's no marked crosswalks between the areas of near Alpine and Wallace intersection. My concern was, how are we going to be addressing increased speeds and potentially having pedestrians crossing? But I know that you already addressed that. Think that you already are considering locations for crossing. I believe the median idea, the median refuge is a great idea. The only other concern on that, if you're going to do that crossing near Wallace, is we have the curve, and also you're coming at a grade, and currently the condition, the sight distance there is not great. So in the future, that might, impact a little bit of visibility in the crosswalk. So doing something more than signage would be ideal. Maybe, RRFBs or some sort of other signalization for pedestrian crossings. And that was it, I think.
Okay, well, that's really good feedback, and we'll definitely take that into account. So that's kind of information we're wanting to hear from you guys tonight. So thank you.
Yeah, we're definitely looking into the sight distance, and we know that at this design speed, it's around just over 300 feet for a stopping sight distance. So the curve is definitely something, both the vertical curve and the horizontal curve, something that we're considering and advance warning and everything, like you had mentioned. So, yep, good input.
Okay, our next speaker is Craig Zink. You are unmuted.
I've already asked all my questions. Thank you.
Okay. Then we have Christina Alfaro. You are unmuted.
Hi, thank you. Good evening. Christian Alfaro. I'm a resident over at Evergreen Meadows. So my concern is regarding the crosswalks. I like the idea of having one connecting Meadowbrook Farms and Evergreen Meadows at the intersection of Wallace. My concern is more on the school area and close to the Alpine intersection. Looking at your design here, I wanted to just make a recommendation for consideration. On the elementary school side, you've got a green rectangle towards a little more to the right. Yes, that spot right there. I think that would be an optimum area to have a crosswalk for the children from Meadowbrook Farms going to the middle school and Evergreen headed over to the elementary. There is a small black path that goes between the homes that connects to the bottom of that walking trail at the middle school. So a lot of children take that path exiting the neighborhood instead of going through Alpine to Evergreen Mill. And so if they were to walk up that path and need to go to the elementary school, I think that would be the best route. Naturally, as humans, we like the path of least resistance, the quickest way there. And while we may design a beautiful patio, we're going to go through the easiest route. So I would ask that you take that spot into consideration.
Okay, great. That's good information. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
Our next speaker is Dennis Walsh. You are unmuted.
Thank you. Just wondering what the impact for the homeowners south of the high school where the property line and the synagogue now sit.
All right, do you guys want to take that?
Or without getting into, I guess, too many, excuse me, specifics, because we can always follow up offline. So where did you mention? Near the synagogue, sir?
Yes, where it goes from 4 lanes to 2 lanes, it really doesn't show a whole lot. And from all your pictures, I don't see how it's just going to go 4 to 2 without having tapers or turn lanes for the synagogue or whatnot.
So what we're doing here, it's a little bit hard to see in this graphic, but excuse me, we do have a taper coming in right here, and that's all designed for the design speed. So you'll be coming in with 2 lanes, and there'll be signage and everything too. And then this lane will drop into 1 and then transition past the synagogue. And the reason we have the curb and gutter offset and we didn't just bring the curb and gutter in, this is actually just a striped line, is because we don't want to construct something that might get ripped out in the future. So we're setting ourselves up for the future widening south of this project. And then on the northbound side, you'd come from 1 lane and it can just open up into 2. There's no problem with that. It's just on the southbound direction, you need the proper merge, which we're showing.
So basically there's very little impact past the property line then.
Correct.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, we have another speaker here. Yasmin Sheikh, you are unmuted.
Hi, yes, I had a question about the storm drainage improvements. I was just wondering if you could elaborate a bit on what all that entails.
Sure.
Okay.
So I'm going to turn that over to our drainage lead, Chris Leonard. But I can just tell you that so the green areas are where we're anticipating to put the facilities. So some of them could be above ground. We're actually looking at potentially below ground facilities as well. So a bunch of different options, but I'll let Chris go ahead and talk a little bit more into the weeds on that.
Yes, hi there. It's Chris Leonard. I'm the drainage lead over at WSP. So yeah, the main thing that's going on with the drainage improvements is, as Christy mentioned when she walked through all the sections, is currently a lot of it is open sections with ditches, And when we go and do the widening, we're going to change that to curb and gutter section. So that means that most of the ditches will be coming out and replaced with a series of inlets and pipes. They are shown, if you zoom way in, you can see them. But again, like everything, the layout is preliminary. As far as additional impacts to individual properties, depending on how the section works out, we might need to grade some short, shallow ditches behind the fill lines. That would be, an impact of an extra 5 or 6 feet onto the property with either an inlet or an end section to bring it into the main drainage system. As far as major impacts, it's like Christy said, it's, we've placed the stormwater management facilities on either town parcels or in the right of way or like open HOA parcels and tried, and as far as we can believe, we succeeded in keeping those away from impacting individual homeowners. So, yeah, so the big green sections are the largest visible surface impact, but even those will mostly just be graded depressed areas most of the time. So
did that answer your question?
I believe so. Could we look at the middle one in a bit more detail? So basically, we're just looking to do some improvements on the grading of the land to help the water flow towards the drain.
Yeah, so these green sections,
like this one, yep.
Yeah, so these green sections are detention facilities. So that means is that we'll be building, either cutting or building a berm and then putting a control structure at the end so that during heavy rain, the idea is that the water slowly fills up these ponds and then slowly drains out over the course of typically 12 or 24 hours. And what that does is it lowers the amount of water flowing through the downstream sections at any given time. Because when we build more pavement, more water runs off than if it was grass. So these facilities are designed to hold that water back and release it slowly to prevent erosion and prevent flooding.
Awesome, thank you. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Chris. All right.
Okay, we have one more here. Carolyn Winters, you are unmuted.
Hi, good evening. This is Carolyn Winters from Evergreen Meadows. I had a couple of questions. I had one similar to the last caller. I wanted to take a closer look at the Wallace Drive runoff area. And I had a question. You mentioned that homeowners would be contacted. My question is, will the HOAs also be contacted and updated with any of the improvements or updates to this design?
Yes, the HOA, I've got their contact information for the management folks, and they were notified about this meeting. And if we're reaching out because we're going to do some field survey work, the HOA would be contacted if that's a property that we're planning on looking at. So the HOAs will be contacted as needed and for any additional neighborhood meetings. So we'll definitely be doing that. What was your other question?
My other question was about impacted homeowners, potentially in the Evergreen Meadows community. It looked like at the Alpine Drive entrance, some of the improvements are pretty close to the property line. So I was just curious, how would that be handled? Will the homeowners be contacted? Will there be discussions about, potential impacts to their property?
Sure, that sounds like a good question for Keith, our land acquisition specialist. Keith, you want to take that one?
Yes, I can take this one. So as a part of the acquisition process, the properties will be appraised to determine the fair market value of the land rights and easements that are needed. Then the homeowners, landowners or HOAs would be contacted with a offer letter to make a bona fide offer for the acquisition of the land rights that are needed, given copies of any valuations and appraisals that have been prepared, copies of the acquisition plats and conveyance instruments that would be needed for the conveyance of the land rights. And then copies of the plan sheets would be given to the landowner so that we could go over the individual impacts to each property and how the roadway will impact the property and the remainder. So the landowners will be contacted, given information and on-site review of the impacts of the project.
And just to follow up quick, if you were concerned about these properties right here, I'm not sure if these were the ones you were mentioning. I don't believe will be impacting these particular properties. So you can see, I'll zoom in a little bit more. And again, this is only preliminary, but we're trying to hold our cut fill limits, which is our limits of construction basically, to this pink line. It's a little bit hard to see, but so we'll be reconstructing a little bit of that trail, but it'll be almost in the same spot it is today, just regraded some. And then we'll tie out our slopes. So it should, here's the right of way, the property lines for those parcels. So we're hoping not to encroach on their rear yards there. But definitely if we were to, then we'd follow the process that Keith just mentioned.
Okay. And for the process that Keith just mentioned, and taking into account that the construction may not start for a couple years, would that activity occur before the development would begin, or like during the development process?
I can go ahead and take that one. So as Karen mentioned on the schedule, so the acquisition of the land rights and the relocation of the utilities would begin upon completion of the design, or at least 90% completion of the design, so that we know the limits of construction. So all land acquisitions and utilities are typically completed before they begin any construction activities.
All right,
great. Thank you so much.
That is it on the callers. If you would like to go back to your questions that were sent in writing.
Okay. So next up on the list was what will be done to block or reduce road noise, which has already increased on the current 2-lane road since Battlefield Parkway was added?
Well, that's a really good question. And I came into this project a couple years in. Is that something, Renee, do you have any thoughts on that you'd like to?
This is a difficult question to answer. Is the funding sources on this project do not include federal money. If we had federal money included on this project, it would require a noise study to be done with this project. The current funding sources do not require that, but that's something that if you let us know which properties, if you can send Karen an email and let her know which property you are primarily concerned about, we can look at what it would entail to do a noise study for that particular area if we find that it would be necessary to do. And just because a noise study is done does not mean that any mitigation would be put in, because there are specific criteria that have to be met with any noise study to determine whether that type of improvement would go in. No, that's probably not the answer you want to hear, but we will look into what could potentially be done if you send Karen an email with the address so we know which area to be looking at.
All right, thanks, Renee.
Okay, the next question is, in what way does the design account for a potential commercial center at the southeast corner of the intersection of South King Street and Evergreen Mill Road?
Okay, yeah, another really good question. Keith, do you want to speak to that a little bit?
Yes, I can speak to that. So during the land acquisition process, we take into consideration what is physically there. We cannot insert any plan approval or land development approval application. If the owner of the property has in the works a land development application for a specific purpose, then as a part of the negotiation process, we can work with them to see if that we can coordinate any opportunities to develop the frontage so that something that the town constructs will not immediately need to be removed and replaced. So that's something that typically occurs. The project, if it's in the land development application process and is being reviewed for approval, then we can work with that landowner during the acquisition of the land rights to coordinate the work.
Thank you, Keith.
Okay, next question. Has there been an evaluation of running all above ground utilities underground?
Yeah, so we haven't actually done a evaluation yet. I know that that's something that everybody's interested in, and we'll have to take a look and see what it would take to do that. Maybe I think we've talked to our engineer about getting some idea of what the cost might be to do that. Again, as we've said, undergrounding can be very expensive, so we would only be able to underground if it's within our budget. So we'll have to take a look at it and get back with you guys, probably at the next neighborhood meeting. We'll have more information.
Yeah, that is something that is not currently included in the scope of this project. We have asked to get an order of magnitude cost for that. And if that's something that a number of people are interested in seeing done, please let us know so that we have that information, because this project will be going back in front of the Planning Commission and the Council each year when we're doing the capital improvement program for approval in each fiscal year before we reach construction. So it would be good to know from you if we have a number of people that are interested.
Karen, this is Keith. I would also like to add, so when we're talking about undergrounding utilities, most residential properties along the west side or going southbound are served by overhead power lines to their homes. So undergrounding, unless the individual homeowners want to participate and underground the lines to their residence, then the utility poles end up having to stay, and they're just a terminal pole, so the power can stay overhead from the roadway, and new transformers would have to be set over to the properties. So undergrounding also requires the coordination of all of the homeowners along there to provide underground service to their residences.
Right. Thank you, Keith. Yeah, it's a little more complicated than one might like to think to get everything underground. Plus,
And
we
the
already have a lot of underground utilities on the corridor, so that
Yes.
just adds to the challenge of finding space underground for additional conduits.
And the underground cost to the residents is on the homeowner and not on the town constructing the project, is my understanding as well.
Because it's off property also.
And a lot of this alignment was set to try to avoid impacting the poles, especially on the southbound side. So I wouldn't think we'd be looking into undergrounding on that southbound side just because there's not really much space to do so. But perhaps, like I had mentioned before, the area in front of the middle school where there's a few poles left that we're going to be touching, we can run some analysis on that and see.
Okay, Christine?
Okay. Next question, and this one may have been asked already. Will there be a crosswalk in front of the schools or near Wallace? Children from both communities need a safe place to cross to get to school or a friend's home.
Yeah, so let me just speak to the crosswalks. We're going to have to speak with the Loudoun County Public Schools because I think they may have some strong feelings about crosswalks between the schools with the 4-lane roads. So we will meet with the schools. We hear crosswalks are important, and we'll have to take a look at it and do some research, and we'll let you know where we're headed at the 60% point. So on the crosswalks, we really want to make sure we've got the schools involved before we get too far down that sort of approach. So I think that's it, Christine. Thank you.
Okay. Next question. How long and how many cars will fit in the through northbound left lane at Evergreen and King? There could be a long delay.
Okay, so that's
I can
sort of
take
a
that
Kristen
one.
question. I don't know if we can give
Yeah,
you the
Kristen
exact
question.
numbers, but
Yep.
she may be able to speak to it. And then if you send that question again to me via email, we'll get you the exact numbers that we have right now based on our design. But Kristen, maybe you can speak to it.
Yeah, right now, the two lanes that are going northbound, one of them will end in the through left lane, and then one of them is going to end as a right lane. The second right turn is going to be a right turn bay that's added to the right side of the roadway. So that through left movement is going to have its own lane. The through left movement, the traffic volumes there are very, very light. The left turns and the throughs together, there are about 20 cars or so in the morning and about 30 cars in the evening. So that movement is by far the lowest on that approach. Those two movements combined, the right turns are a lot higher, a lot higher than that. So the left through movements, and they'll be able to stack up in that lane if they need to. So they're not going to have a separate left turn bay for that.
You can even kind of see in this aerial in the background, see all these cars piled up, but that's in the right lane. I was just looking at that. You can see all that. So that's one of the reasons we're going to be adding the dual rights, like Kristen mentioned, because this is a really heavy movement.
And
it's
we
not going to
did-
fix everything at South King Street, but we'll do what we can within the project scope. We won't be touching any of the turn lanes on the opposite side.
Right, that's an important piece to mention at this point is the South King intersection itself is not part of the scope of this project. Just from Evergreen moving towards the schools is part of this project. So we're gonna do what we can on the Evergreen side, and then the town will have to look at a different project for the rest of the intersection.
And we did evaluate a few different layouts on this approach, separating the lefts and the throughs and rights. And this was the layout that provided the best operation for a reasonable cost. So hope that answers your question.
Got any more, Christine?
Yes, I do. So next question, could you speak about the impact on the second entrance to Evergreen Meadows or the intersection with Wallace Drive?
I could take this one.
All right.
So here, let me zoom in a little bit more. I think this is your question, approaching Wallace Drive. So here, our section will be widened toward Wallace Drive. You can see the yellow, so basically both lanes widening in this direction. We'll also have an 8-foot buffer, and then we'll have the trail. And then there'll be some open space, and then the stormwater management facility. So you can see some of the impact lines. Let me zoom in a little bit more. This pink line here is where some of the grading is anticipated to go to. But most of all of this is within the HOA parcel right here. And then we'll also be, adding updating the curb ramps, things like that, adjusting the crosswalk. So this is basically what's going on right near there. It's about 2 lanes widened. I don't know if there was anything more specific, or you can feel free to post a follow-up in the chat if I didn't cover exactly what you were looking for.
Make sure it's in the Q&A, not the chat.
Oh, sorry. Yep, Q&A.
All right, Christine.
Okay. Next question. Will this project be done at the same time as the King Street and Route 15 interchange work?
Wow, that's a really good question, and I don't know that I have the answer.
And would this be referring to the bypass improvements that
could be
King?
right at King and 7?
Yes, so I can actually answer this as this is at the King Street exit on the 7 and 15 bypass. That work is starting this month. It will reach substantial completion by the end of the year and will have final completion by April of the following year is the current schedule.
Okay, so that project should be done before our project begins construction then. All right.
Okay. So next question. Is it possible to have speed cameras added near the schools to encourage people to follow the speed limit? Speeding is a problem on this stretch of road.
And that's definitely a suggestion we can look at and evaluate more strongly. So I appreciate the suggestion. We'll look at that.
Okay. Next question. Could you please review the details of the layout at the southern end of the road? Not sure which road that is. Guess I get Evergreen.
Okay, I can.
We did kind of speak to
I'm
that a little
guessing,
bit already,
yeah,
I think.
maybe that question might have already been answered. But we're going to be posting this exhibit too. So if you feel free to, take a look at it, and if you have any specific questions on exactly what's going on, you can follow up with Karen. We're happy to chat with anyone, meet with you, have a phone call. But this is basically what's going on there. We're doing a little bit of widening on either side, but the improvements don't go past the second high school entrance, the southern entrance.
Okay. Next question. How will traffic safety be addressed? Speeding and running red lights is already an issue. With road widening, typically comes more speeding. What measures will be taken to protect pedestrians as well as other vehicles? How will this project impact traffic on King Street and Route 15?
I can take that
That
one.
sounds like it might be yours.
Sure. We're essentially targeting the safety improvements to where we see an existing issue, which primarily is at the intersection of Battlefield Parkway and Evergreen Mill Road. There were a lot of angle crashes at that intersection. Changing the signal from the permitted protected, where you see the green ball and the green arrow, changing that to a green arrow only, and having the dual left turns, that's going to significantly improve the safety at that intersection. That will really reduce angle crashes at that location. And that's where we see most of the crashes in this corridor. The second location I would say would be up at South King Street, somewhat approaching South King Street. Now, we're not making changes on South King Street itself, so it wouldn't change anything on South King Street. But it looked like approaching South King Street, there were a decent amount of rear end crashes, and you tend to get those with stop and go type operations. And so when we're improving that approach and improving the cues on that approach, you will see a reduction in the crash rate. And so that at both of these locations, you'll see a reduction in the crash rate, crashes per number of vehicles. In terms of speeding along the corridor, there are a couple of considerations. One involves potentially narrowing the lanes, which kind of systemically helps increase the safety and reduce the speeds along the corridor. We're considering those speed feedback signs, like was mentioned on one of the previous comments about showing people, hey, this is the speed you're going, here's the speed limit, and this is the speed you're going. Those are very effective. As well as putting medians in locations where we can put in raised medians. That really helps with head-on collisions or opposite direction side swipes. So safety is definitely a consideration for this project. We're targeting the safety improvements to where we see existing potential issue or existing issues, but the issues are not extremely severe compared to some of the other busier roadways. But for this roadway, we're targeting the improvements to those specific locations and considering safety overall, considering systemic measures.
And I can just follow up a little bit too with the pedestrian safety. So we're definitely going to be increasing the pedestrian safety by adding the curb and gutter as well as the off the road trail. So that way we won't have bikers on the shoulder here where we have this little shoulder section. Now they're going to have full connectivity with their trail system. So especially for some of the younger kids, this will definitely increase the safety with getting to and from school and friends' houses in this area, and then the sidewalk on the other side. So it won't be like you're walking along the edge of the shoulder. I know we've had quite a few site visits along this roadway and you're walking along this kind of small shoulder and then you come up to this berm and kind of just take your life in your hands as you're making your way up here. So that will definitely be a big safety improvement for all the pedestrians and bicyclists.
All right, Christine, got any more?
Question. Yes, 1, 2, 5 more at this time. Are the stormwater facilities wet or dry ponds?
All right, I'll hand that back to Chris.
Yep.
Discuss those.
Me. Yeah, so in our current layout, all the surface facilities are dry ponds. The benefit you get with wet ponds is more efficient water quality treatment, but because of the way the project is laid out in its location, we are going to be meeting those requirements with offsite nutrient credits. So yeah, the ponds as shown here are dry ponds that will just be serving a detention capacity. And then the one over under the pump station is planned to be an underground facility. All right, I think that should cover it.
Thank you.
Next question. How much tree loss do you anticipate, particularly in front of the elementary and middle school properties and in front of the Alpine Drive area?
All right, so let me start that and then Christy can talk about the details. This project will be trying to maintain the trees. So if we take trees out, we put them back in. If we're not able to do that, we will be contributing to the town's tree bank so that trees will get put in back in the town, hopefully nearby. But I'll let Christy speak to how many of the trees in those areas we might actually be impacting.
Sure. You can see some of the trees in this aerial. It's hard to tell exactly which trees, but trying to zoom in. So we won't be impacting any of the trees on this side, on the southbound side, because we're really just maintaining the same sidewalk limits. And then in front of the middle school, we will have some trees impacted. You can see as the trail is going to get relocated back just a little bit to provide the necessary buffer between the edge of the widened road. So there will be some impacts to a few trees here. It's hard to tell, 1, 2, 3 maybe. And then as we go north, it's like it's really hard to tell it at this stage, but as Karen mentioned, any trees we impact, we're doing landscaping plans as part of this project. It's within our scope to do that. We're going to do our best to replace what we can if we've impacted anything or if we've come within, the critical root zone and our arborist says, okay, you're a little too close with this widening. We'll have to remove this tree. Then we'll do our best to replace it or contribute to the tree bank, as Karen mentioned.
And just to explain a little bit more about what the tree bank is, all of the capital projects that the town does follows a no net loss tree policy. So any trees that are removed are looked at from a size and condition perspective. So it is not necessarily a one-for-one replacement. If we're taking down a large tree that is in excellent condition, it could equate to 3, 4, maybe even 5 trees. We do make every effort to plant the trees back within the footprint of the project, and it's only those trees that don't fit within the project that we then make a monetary contribution to the tree bank. And the tree bank is a fund that the town's urban forester can then use to plant trees in other areas of the town to maintain the tree canopy.
Thank you, Renee. You said that so much better. Christine?
Okay. Will Alpine or Wallace access be blocked during this project?
Okay, I think I can start on that one. It's our goal to maintain access throughout this construction project. So the quick answer is yes, we should be maintaining access. The less quick answer is maybe there would be some very short times where we might have to do work that could require us to close the intersection, but we haven't completed our MOT plans yet. So as we get closer to final design, we'll be generating the MOT plans and we'll know more then. Chrissy, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I think you said it about right. Like you said, just there might be some minimal impacts, but our goal is to keep everything open and moving. But for instance, we're installing this one pipe. There could be a quick closure while they're installing this pipe, and then they'll cover it with plates so you can get out, things like that. But we'll be maintaining access.
All right, Christine.
Will additional stoplights be added to some of these intersections?
This one for Kristen.
So we are considering a potential signal at Alpine, and but we would have to do due process and do a signal warrant study to determine if it is warranted. Would it be warranted in the future? So we don't want to put in a signal if it's not warranted. So it's a consideration, but right now we don't have a determination of if we would or wouldn't. That would be done more at a 60% level.
Right.
And as of now, it's definitely not included in the scope, but it's something we are going to do a study to see, because we have heard some feedback from various folks that we should look into that.
So if you are interested in the signal, let us know, but it's got to be warranted. And right now we don't have any additional signals planned for this corridor because we don't believe they are warranted.
Can one of you explain what that means for a signal to be warranted?
Sure. We take traffic counts throughout the entire day, and we count the major approaches, so along Evergreen Mill Road, and then we count the minor approaches. And the warrants, I'll just go into a few of them. They're essentially you evaluate peak hour operations, peak hour volumes, you evaluate a 4-hour period during the day, and you evaluate an 8-hour period during the day. And depending on that combination of volumes, the volumes on the major street and the volumes on the minor street, depending on that combination, if one of them is really high versus another's low, then the signal could be warranted based on the volumes of either a peak hour or a 4-hour or an 8-hour. There are some other warrants that, I won't go into details of those, but those are primarily the ones that we look at for determining if a signal is warranted.
Thank you.
Any more questions, Christine?
So there's more of a comment. The last one. It might be important to note that the HOA property at Wallace and Evergreen Mill is owned by Meadowbrook HOA and not Evergreen Meadows.
Okay.
Yep.
And
That's
at
right.
this time, there are no more questions in the Q&A box.
Okay. And do we have anybody else that's raised their hand? I think we might have one call-in user that we would want to see if they have a question.
No one has their hand raised at this point.
Okay. Would you unmute that call-in user? It looks like we have one call-in user. Would you?
So there is a call-in user here that does not have a name associated with it. If you have a question, you are unmuted and may ask your question.
All right, I guess they don't have a question. Okay, well, it looks like we've gotten through all our questions at this point. Does anybody have anything else they wanted to add? I think I see one hand, Anne. Was that already taken care of?
It is not. Cynthia Pastorana, you are now unmuted for your question.
Hi, please, can you explain what's going to be the impact for the neighbors between Alpine and Willis on Evergreen Mill Road? Thank you.
Sure. Okay, I think the question was on this area here. So, and this exhibit will be posted as I mentioned. So if you have very specific questions, you can feel free to reach out. But you can see the yellow area is what will be widening, about 2 lanes or 1.5 lanes or so in between Alpine and Wallace. And then we'll have the trail also running in that area. And along with that, so we'll be doing a little bit of driveway improvements similar to on the other side where we're putting a trail. We need to regrade some of these driveways a little bit for the accessible path, so to keep it a 2% accessible path. So you can see that shown in here. So that's
right. And again, if you want to know some more specifics, then just reach out to me. When we finish up, we'll put that slide back up with my contact information. And again, remember, this is 30%, so we've still got a ways to go before we know exactly what all the impacts will be.
But now's a great time for those comments. I mean, everyone's seen that curve where it's like you give comments here, we can incorporate them. You know, it doesn't impact the schedule or the budget, but if you give comments when we're at 90%, 100%, it's a lot harder to incorporate your comments. So we're really hoping to get some good feedback after this meeting.
All right. I think we've answered all the questions. Is anything
So
else?
there are a few more questions, Karen, that just came
Okay.
in. Can you show, so mostly follow-up questions. Can you please show your contact information again for everyone in case they want to reach you?
Yep.
Thank
Chrissy's
you.
got that up on the screen.
And then the other question is, will there be additional meetings like this as the design matures?
Yes, there will. So that's a really good segue. Thank you very much. We'll be, I think we're planning on doing another neighborhood meeting after we complete the 60% and go through the formal review process with VDOT, Loudoun County, talk to the schools. So I think that's going to be the point where we come back to you. And on the slide, I think we were thinking, when were we thinking that was going to be, Christy? Can you flip back to that slide?
Yeah, we were thinking next winter, maybe the spring, depending on how quickly we get VDOT comments back.
Right. So sort of maybe this time next year, we'll be reaching back out to you. All right. Anything else, Christine?
I have nothing more.
All right. Well, terrific. Thanks, guys, for coming out and taking the time to meet with us tonight. We got some really good input and some excellent questions. Again, you've got my information on the screen. It's also available on the Evergreen Mill website, which is the item at the bottom. So feel free to reach out. We're also going to post on the website the information that we've discussed tonight. Plus, we're also going to provide a way for you to sign up for future updates on the project. So look for that. It's going to take us a couple weeks to get all this stuff up for you, but look for that. That should be coming soon. I think that's it. Thank you, everybody. Thank you to our engineers for their help tonight and for all the town team folks. And thanks for all you guys coming out to find out about this project. We look forward to seeing you again at 60%.
Yep.
And please don't hesitate to reach out and contact the town project manager anytime related to this project. You do not have to wait for that 60% neighborhood input meeting.
Yep, I'll be happy to try to answer your questions or discuss whatever you've got, any concerns or issues or thoughts. All right. So I think we're going to close up. And I think you have the ability to close the attendees portion.
Which I have just done.
All right, so.
And do you want me to stop recording?
Yes.